Welcome back to a new episode of Thumbprints and Signatures. On today's episode, we're rounding out the trio of the Leica 40mm Summicron line, featuring the Leica Q3 43. This is going to be a follow-up video to the 28 versus 43mm Q3 video that we did earlier this year, and it's also going to be a continuation to kind of round out the 40mm line that we've also covered in previous episodes. And if you haven't already checked out those videos, you can check it out right up here, or you can hit the like and subscribe and follow for more videos. So we've talked about APO a little bit on the channel before with the APO versus aspherical Summicron lenses. And if you haven't seen that video, I go into a brief description and show you side-by-side comparisons of the difference between the APO SL line versus the aspherical SL line. This is going to be a similar explanation as to what makes the lens on the Q3 so special. It features a 43mm f2 Summicron APO aspherical lens. So to give you a quick refresher on what an APO construction does, it allows light to pass through the center of the lens through a very fine point, allowing for perfect or near perfect registration onto the sensor, resulting in a more color accurate and sharper image. So next time someone asks, what's apochromatic? You just tell them it funnels a rainbow through a very fine point and you get a sharp image. And paired with a high resolution sensor, you get an image that gives you the highest amount of detail, the most tonal contrast in terms of micro contrast in your highlights and shadows, as well as shadow and highlight retention. So you get the most and highest image quality possible through an APO construction. Now that can vary when you're using vintage lenses where it's optimal at certain distances, and what Leica has done is it's optimal at all working focal distances. Now you might be wondering, why 43mm? Why not just do 40mm like the previous iterations of the 40mm Summicron? 43mm actually refers to the diagonal measurement of the sensor. So when you pair that high resolution lens with a high resolution sensor, you're maximizing the output of the sensor exponentially. Now I'm sure you've heard this before, that 40mm is the closest representation to the human eye, and it kind of portrays details and objects more accurate to our normal depth perception. And I feel like that's pretty true, especially looking through the 43mm directly through the viewfinder. In past iterations, you were only able to see through a rangefinder or through a tiny viewfinder on a point-and-shoot camera. Now we're seeing the actual depth portrayed in this lens, and it feels very natural to what I'm already seeing in front of me. Now, the 43mm focal length is closer than a 35 and a little bit wider than a 50, so you do have to be more intentional with your compositions and how you layer a photo. When I'm using a standard focal length, I typically tend to turn the camera portrait oriented or vertical, but with the 43mm, I felt compelled to also shoot landscape. You can definitely treat this lens like a 50 or a 35, depending on how you intentionally use the focal length. In our previous video, I raised a few questions regarding the Leica Q3 and the Leica Q3 43. Now, since both of these are the same camera and same camera body, just different lenses, do you go with the Summilux or do you go with the APO Summicron? At the end of the day, that's a really hard question to answer. One is a 28 1.7 lens and the other is a 43 f2 lens. You have two different focal lengths, two different glass compositions, and two different outputs. So some questions you might want to consider when you're choosing between the different Q3 options is, do I need the extra stop of light or do I prefer the higher image quality? One maximizes the higher resolution sensor and the other gives you the best low light capabilities possible. Since higher ISO capabilities and performance has been improved in most cameras these days, that begs the question, is f2 more than enough or is 1.7 more than enough? Now I think that's up to you to decide, so you can leave a comment down below what you think. Personally, it's an intentional choice, and it's not really fair to pit a 28mm lens versus a 43mm lens. They're just two different tools for different case scenarios, because at the end of the day, they are different lenses. And to touch back on the lens signature of the Leica Q3 43's lens, you get something a little bit more contemporary, very modern. It's very much up there with the Leica SL APO lenses. I wasn't kidding when I was saying, I really hope we could get this lens for an SL system. Or the better question, when can we get this focal length as an SL lens? I think it would be very cool to carry on the tradition of the 43mm focal length. And in the case of the Q3 43, being able to optimize this new triple resolution sensor gives you a new outlook and output that we've never seen on the Q system before. As I mentioned in our previous video, the 28 1.7 Summilux lens found in the Q system has been around for nearly a decade. The last time that we saw the 40mm focal length in the main line of Leica cameras was back in 2006 with the Leica CM. Now, we covered that in a previous episode of Thumbprints and Signatures, which you can check right up here. So it's been nearly 20 years since we've seen the 40mm focal length, aside from the 45 L-Merit-S lens, as well as the 40 Summilux Cinema lens. They're not Summicrons, one's an L-Merit, one's a Summilux. Plus, the 40mm line has always had a special place in Leica's history for the compact cameras. And while the Q3 43 is not as compact as the CL or the CM, I think it's really cool that Leica has continued the legacy and heritage of the 40mm focal length. And while it might not be the same as its original counterparts, I think it takes the building blocks that those lenses have laid and has elevated it to a new audience and also updated it for today's standards. So when you're considering between the Q3 or the Q3 43, a few things you want to think about are image quality, low light capabilities, as well as intentionality. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Thumbprints and Signatures. I really hope you guys enjoyed this continuation to the deep dive of the 40mm Summicron line that we had going on unintentionally. It's been really fun piecing together the lore of Leica lenses, even though we're looking at it one step at a time. And let me know what you think about the Q3 43 or the 40mm lineup in general. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And don't forget to like and subscribe to stay up to date on our newest videos. We'll be having more of Norman and Max, and I'll be helping out and popping in on their videos as well. And don't forget to check out leicastoresf.com and camerawest.com for all your new and pre-owned camera needs. Once again, my name is Carlo. Thank you for watching.